Welcome to this episode of the Sports Detective Podcast Show. My name is James Williams, and today we are discussing Carmelo Anthony and the Denver Nuggets beef that they have with each other. Just to give a little bit of a context with this, the reason they have beef is because Carmelo Anthony, when he played his 7.5 years with the Nuggets, he wore the number 15. And then a few years after he left, and Nikola Jokic has gone on to be the most accomplished and best Denver Nugget of all time. So, because of that and the fact that they both wore the same numbers, Nikola Jokic's number will get retired in Denver. And because his number will get retired in Denver and he had the same number as Carmelo Anthony's number will not get retired in Denver. And Carmelo is also obviously, and he's said this publicly a few times, he's pretty salty about this. And he, talked about this on his show, Melo and Mero Brooklyn. I don't know if it's his show or something with Mero. I guess it is. I've never heard of it before, but we'll play this clip here and then we'll kind of discuss the parts where Carmelo is right. Because I think the overall message he's right about, but there's also a lot of parts here where I think he's very, not necessarily the most accurate with his analysis of why Denver gave Jokic the number. So we'll play this clip here and then we'll talk about it.
Look me in my eyes. You had to feel away when they gave Jokic that 15, bro, because that's Melo.
Hell yeah.
Did you think it was a petty maneuver?
It was a petty maneuver. It wasn't like, oh, we got numbers to choose from. It was like, here,
Take this one.
you got 15.
Ooh.
And y'all put Jokic in the middle of that. He don't know what the
He don't
going
even
on.
care.
He could have been like, I want to wear 15. He could have been like, 15 is here. I can wear 15. Oh, that's Melo's number. You know what I mean? Like, just pay homage. I don't know. He could have worn because he wanted to pay homage.
Right.
But what I believe is that they gave him 15 to try to erase
What you did,
what I
your
did.
accomplishments over there.
in
That's
Denver.
crazy.
I used to think about it. I don't think about this shit no more, though.
Yeah.
Because what's meant to be
Okay.
is meant.
So there's the whole clip there. This went very much viral. People were pointing out why Jokic wore the number 15. Where's the number 15? I'll get to that here in a minute. But to where Carmelo was right about this. This is where he's right. He says it wrong, but he's right about this part of it. Them giving Jokic number 15, he's right about the part that, like, it's petty that the Denver Nuggets did not hold the number 15. And because here's the thing too, guys, they had somebody else wear number 15 before Jokic. His name is Anthony Randolph. He was he spent his last 2 years in Denver and he was a bust. And then Nikola Jokic comes around and he gets number 15. So Carmelo's right that they didn't hold the number 15. Like, for example, this is a thing that they do in the NBA if they think they're going to retire a jersey one day. They will basically hold that number, and like when players get to choose whatever number they want to wear, they'll be like, hey, number 15 isn't on the table because we're probably going to retire Melo one day. So that's kind of the part there. He's right that they were petty to not protect that number. Where he's wrong here is that they didn't purposely give Nikola Jokic that number. A few things off of that point. Why does Nikola Jokic wear the number 15? He wears the number 15 because apparently in Serbia, he wore the number 15. The reason he wore number 15 in Serbia, I read this online. I don't know if it's true, but it sounds legit, is they only give out numbers like 1 through 15 in Serbia. And the low numbers like 1, 2, 3 are to like the guards and like the smaller players. And like the bigger numbers, like 15, are given to like the biggest players on the team, the centers. So that's why Nikola Jokic wore number 15, because he wore it in Serbia. To the point that they gave him the number because they knew it would erase Carmelo Anthony's legacy. If they did that, knowing that Nikola Jokic would one day, because Nikola Jokic was drafted in the second round, he was this fat kid from Serbia that was overweight. He drank like 3 liters of soda a day. He was out of shape perennially. And if they knew that that guy that they drafted with the 43rd pick would become a guy that would win them an NBA championship, win a finals MVP, win back-to-back MVPs, and become one of the top 20 greatest players in NBA history. If Tim Connolly knew that when he drafted him in the second round, he is some sort of either evil genius, and he is definitely a basketball genius, because no one was saying that stuff. Carmelo would maybe have a point if like Nikola Jokic was drafted like top 5, or if he was like this prized pick in the draft, kind of like how Zion was, or how Embiid was at one point, or Andrew Wiggins was at one point, or Luka. But no, this guy was drafted in the second round. It was more likely that Nikola Jokic would be out of the NBA in like 3 years than he would go on the course that he had. So there was like, I don't know what percentage you would put it at, but the fact of them giving him 15 and him having the career that he had, was less than 1% that would ever happen. So to kind of like, so that's basically to kind of like summer up that stuff. It wasn't a petty, it was a petty maneuver for them to give out the number 15, but to purposely give Jokic 15, that's just an unintended consequence here. So to that point here, and I want to talk about why NBA teams will retire jersey numbers, and kind of get into the point of why Denver didn't hold Carmelo's number. So to how teams retire jersey numbers, I know this a little bit because when I started this show a few years ago, I was going to do this episode where I was going to talk about like who are the people that have their jersey retirements that are going to come up soon. And I was going to kind of like speculate of whose jersey I thought would end up being retired. And I was doing this more of the scope of like college basketball. And for college basketball, to give you a little bit of context, trust me, I'll get to the NBA again here in a second. In college basketball, it's like you have like a certain set of requirements that you have to get in order for your jersey to be retired. So I'm pretty sure like at my alma mater, Iowa State, you have to like get a degree and you have to be an All-American. I'm pretty sure that's it. There might be one or two other things you have to get, but that's basically it. For a school like North Carolina, though, you have to like become like a national player of the year, win a national championship, and get a degree. It's usually stuff like that. There's like a set list of criteria for you to become eligible to get your number retired. Versus in the NBA, it doesn't matter. It's basically depends on the owner. There isn't like a thing where it's like, hey, if you get 4 All-NBAs while you're on this team, that means you get your jersey retired. For example, it's basically the owner. Now, there's been times in NBA history where owners have, retired jerseys. They've either sped those up a little bit, just because they want some good press and some PR. There's a lot of different reasons why people retire jerseys. A lot of times it's like a celebration of someone's career, and it's always like a good thing when it happens. It's very celebratory and it's all good times, good vibes. So sometimes if an owner isn't necessarily liked at the time, they will speed up for jersey retirement so they get some good press. An example of this, well, not an example of this, but an example that accomplishments don't necessarily lead to NBA jerseys getting retired. Nate McMillan, if you go to Oklahoma City, if you go to an Oklahoma City Thunder game and you look up in the rafters, Nate McMillan's jersey is retired in Oklahoma City. Nate McMillan never played for Oklahoma City, but he did play for that specific franchise when they were in Seattle. Nate McMillan spent 12 years in Seattle. I believe he coached them for a few years after he retired. Just a little bit of a guess. How many times in Nate McMillan's career did he average over 10 points a game? The answer is 0. There are 0 times in his career where Nate McMillan averaged over 10 times a game. I know he got a few all defensive teams, and I think he led the league in steals one time. But the reason he got his jersey retired is because everyone loved him. The franchise loved him. The fans loved him. He was a fan favorite. He coached the team for a while. Everyone loved Nate McMillan. And I think that's why part of the reason why he's had a lot of times getting multiple head coaching opportunities, and a lot of times why players really like playing for him, is Nate McMillan's just a very likable guy. Not saying Carmelo isn't a very likable guy, because he is very likable. Like, I like Carmelo. I'm a kid of the 2000s. I love Carmelo. One of my favorite players all time. Love playing with him in 2K. We all liked wearing the headband because of Carmelo. He had a very distinct look. And he was a very awesome, key notable player in the 2000s. With that being said, why did Denver decide to hold out and not save his jersey? The reason is because the way Carmelo left Denver, the way he did it is very similar to how Anthony Davis did it when he left New Orleans to the Lakers. It's very similar to Paul George going to OKC, to the Clippers, Harden the 3 times he left, KD when he left Brooklyn to Phoenix recently. It's very similar to that. The difference is, at that time, no one else was doing that. No one else was doing that at that time. It was very unprecedented. It was very much, frowned upon. Now it's a little bit more acceptable. But back then, it was a way, way different thing. And if you do this through the Carmelo story, so why did Carmelo ask for a trade out of Denver to go to the Knicks? If you listen to Carmelo, this is his side of the story. He said this at the time. He said it a few years ago. Because he also said a few years ago he never wanted to leave Denver. And I'm like, well, you requested a trade, dude. And he's like, well, this is why I requested a trade. Because Denver was trying to rebuild. And he didn't want to be a part of a rebuild. And he said, well, they weren't going to sign Kenyon Martin. They weren't going to re-sign Chauncey Billups. They were going to get rid of JR. They already got rid of Dante Jones. And I don't want to be a part of a rebuild. So trade me. And trade me to the New York Knicks. This is where his argument falls apart. Denver was not trying to do a rebuild. And I'll show you kind of some facts that back this up. Okay. I'll address all of the reasons that Denver wanted to move off all of those guys. They wanted to move off Kenyon Martin and Chauncey Billups because they were getting older. And why would they put a lot of money on these older players when they're trying to compete and win? And when, like, towards the end of this contract, when Melo's in his prime, they would basically be washed if they weren't going to be washed, a year or two into the contract. So that's why they moved off of those guys. J.R. Smith had a lot of problems earlier in his career, guys. He had a lot of off the court stuff where he had a lot of maturity issues. He was just very much a problem for front offices, for head coaches to deal with. He was able to kind of vitalize his image when he won the championship for Cleveland. But it was kind of like when Cleveland traded for him, it was kind of like they need to they got the best out of him. And it was kind of like, a little bit of a coin flip when Cleveland traded for him if they were going to be able to get that. The Dante Jones point. Dante Jones was like the 9th man on their team. And do you guys remember where Dante Jones went after he went to Denver and what he did in the NBA? I don't either, because he wasn't that good of a player. So the idea that Carmelo was mad that they were going to get into a rebuild when they had him either in the middle of his prime or the beginning of his prime or about to enter his prime was absolute baloney. It is just not true. And I'll go ahead and just show you guys here. So Carmelo got traded in the middle of the 2011-2012 season. And we're right here now. We're on the Denver Nuggets. I'll zoom in a little bit. I think this is all we need. So he got traded in the middle of this season. So 2009, they make the Western Conference Finals. 2009, 2010, they lose in the first round. You could be like, well, they went down. I guess they went down 1 win, and they got eliminated in the. Wait, I have the right years, right? Yeah, they went down 1 win. They got eliminated the first round, so you could say, well, they're ready to tear it down, build it back up. And Carmelo didn't want to be a part of that. Well, a big reason why they lost in the first round this year, guys, is because George Karl, their head coach, he had I think it was neck cancer, and he had to take a leave of absence for the playoffs. Not having your head coach, who was very, very good, like George Karl was, could very much affect your ability to succeed in the playoffs. And I believe they lost to Utah that year in the playoffs. So then Carmelo that summer requests a trade. Eventually is getting traded in the middle of the season. That year he got traded, guys, they won 50 games. Does that look like a team that wants to rebuild? Chauncey Billups had a quote before the season started. He said that if everyone comes back and everyone is together and everyone is bought in, we think we can compete for an NBA championship. Chauncey Billups said that. And he was basically saying, hey, if Carmelo comes back and he wants to play with us, we can compete for a championship this year, the very next year. If they're doing a rebuild, wouldn't they just try and tank, get a draft pick? Nope. Made the playoffs. Lost in the first round. Next year, all right, year after Carmelo's gone, that now is when they decide to tank. They won 57 games. 2 years after Carmelo Anthony left. They won 57 games. I believe that was the year, too. Carmelo made the second round of the playoffs. They did lose in the first round, but they still won 57 games, guys. Denver was very well run at this time. If Carmelo stayed, they could have competed for championships. And to the point too, where he's like, "Oh, I want to go to. I didn't want to be a part of a rebuild." So it's like, okay, try and trade me to a contender. He didn't want that. He said, "No, trade me to the New York Knicks and only the New York Knicks." And if you know anything about basketball history, at least 21st century basketball history, the New York Knicks were the worst run NBA franchise basically for the 21st century until like 3 years ago. Now you could argue maybe like the Hawks or something, or maybe the Hornets, but or not the Hawks, excuse me, pardon me. You could argue the Hornets of Charlotte, or you could argue like the Pelicans. Those are maybe like two other ones. There might be another one that I'm not. I guess you could argue the Kings too, but the Kings did make a conference finals at one point. They did have a good like little stretch at the beginning of the century, but either way, the New York Knicks were like bottom 5. Any way you slice it and dice it. So Carmelo Anthony wanted to go to the Knicks supposedly because he didn't want to be a part of a rebuild. Even though the Knicks, when he got there, hadn't had a winning season in over a decade. So his story doesn't add up of why he wanted to leave. So why did Carmelo Anthony want to leave? Again, no shame on leaving. No shame on leaving. There is no shame on being on a team, multiple different teams for your career. That's how most players' careers go. So no shame on that. But why did Carmelo Anthony want to leave? Was it because the Nuggets were lowballing him? Nope. The same extension that he signed with the Knicks is the same exact offer that the Denver Nuggets offered him to extend in Denver. He left because he wanted business opportunities in New York and he wanted to be a celebrity. That's why he left. And he accomplished that. He's rich. I'm sure he made a bunch of money off of the advertisements that he got from being in New York. Probably all the businesses that he was a part of being in New York. And he's a celebrity. He has his own show, NBA figures of the last, 20 years. And part of that is because he went to the New York Knicks and was in one of the biggest markets and one of the biggest brands in the NBA. But this is kind of the legacy of Carmelo, guys. Just kind of getting to the big picture, and that's kind of how we'll end this. This is the path he chose. When he decided to leave Denver, he basically chose like, hey, I'm too big for you guys. I'm better than you guys, and I want to leave and go somewhere else. If he really cared about his legacy in Denver, he wouldn't have left. Because again, too, guys, we just went over it. It wasn't going to the Knicks wasn't a better winning situation. It wasn't a better winning situation with basically a bunch of role players. George Karl was able to get this Denver team to the playoffs multiple times after Carmelo left. It wasn't hey, I want to go play with another star. He had an opportunity to be on the Miami Heat Big Three. Instead, he wanted more money, which again, no shame in that. But again, these are sometimes the consequences of that, of wanting to go to the bigger market for more media and money opportunities. You're not going to get your jersey retired, especially when you left the way that you left. I read a bunch of articles about this today. I went back and I read all of the articles of Carmelo wanting to leave. Well, not all of them, but a lot of them. And by the time Carmelo left in New York, in Denver, Denver was sick of him. They were like, get this guy out of here. We want to get the pieces back and we still want to compete. That was the fans' mindset. They hated Carmelo when he left. So because they hated him when he left, that's part of the reason why the franchise was like, hey, man, we don't care. Screw this guy. He thinks he's better than us. He thinks he can go and win without us. We'll give his number away. Now, again, they probably never thought that like his number. Now, maybe if like Jokic would have flamed out in 3 years, maybe at that point they'd be like, all right, we see where Carmelo's career is going. He's going to be a top 75 guy all time. Maybe now we'll kind of hold off his number and we'll, save it so we can retire it one day. But by the time that they could have eventually thought that or noticed that, Jokic had already taken off and he was already a comet. And he was already on his way to being a multiple-time All-Star. So there you have it, guys. That's basically all I have to say about this topic here. Just kind of reiterate it at the end. I really do like Carmelo, but this is just the path he chose. He chose money, celebrity, and he did that over and over again in his career. He chose the money and the contract instead of going to the Heat, he stayed with Denver, and then he got traded. Instead of leaving New York in 2016, after things had already kind of spiraled out of control there in 2016, because again, he only won one playoff series with the Knicks. He could have left to go to Houston and compete for titles and be co-stars with James Harden right before Harden was about to take off. Instead, he stayed in New York, signed an extension. And that's basically Carmelo's career. He, over and over again, he had opportunities to go to places, team up with stars, and compete for championships. And by the time he eventually did that, he got traded to the Thunder. And by then, his prime was basically gone. That happened 1 year. And then after that, he was basically just a role player for the rest of his year. So he decided to do that stuff too late. So love Carmelo. He's a Hall of Famer, top 75 guy all time. But I don't really have that much sympathy for him that the Nuggets aren't going to retire his jersey, that they didn't hold it out, because, hey, man, when you decided to leave the way that you did, I mean, you kind of had it coming. So there you go, guys. That's going to do it for this clip today. I went a little bit longer on this than I thought. Thank you very much for watching if you made it all the way to this part. If you like content like this, if you like NBA talk, please hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, please hit that like button. I've been doing this now for over 3 years. We're about to enter our 4th year doing this. I'm just starting now to put clips like this and other interviews that I've done on YouTube. I've talked NBA, college football, NFL, college basketball, all kinds of stuff, some sports kind of media stuff. We did a video about Stephen A the other day. So thank you very much for watching. If you like this, subscribe, explore the content channel on this page a little bit more, and I'll talk to you next time. Thanks for watching.